The night of November 12, 1995, was clear and cold over the Arabian Sea. Air India Flight 171, a brand new Boeing 747-400, sliced through the inky blackness. It was a routine flight from Mumbai to London. Families, business travelers, holidaymakers. Captain Alok Sharma and First Officer Rohan Mehta were seasoned veterans, their calm voices a steady presence in the cockpit. The aircraft, named Empress of the Skies, climbed gracefully towards its cruising altitude, a silver giant against a canvas of stars. On the ground, air traffic controllers watched its steady blip on their radar screens. Just another flight on a busy night. Suddenly, without warning, the serene atmosphere shattered. A violent shudder ripped through the aircraft. Alarms blared, a cacophony of urgent, piercing sounds that signaled a dire emergency.
Mayday, 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 we have a flight control issue. We are in an uncontrolled dive.
The plane was falling out of the sky, a metal coffin plunging towards the dark waters below. The struggle was brief and brutal. The massive jet was no match for the aerodynamic forces tearing it apart. For the 345 souls on board, these last moments were a blur of terror and confusion. On the radar screen, the blip that was Air India 171 vanished. It simply disappeared. The aircraft struck the water with unimaginable force. It disintegrated on impact, scattering debris over several square kilometers of the ocean. For the families waiting in London, the night turned into an endless vigil of horror. News reports were scant, then grim. The flight was missing. A search was underway. Hope dwindled with each passing hour, replaced by the crushing certainty of loss. The crash of Air India 171 became one of the darkest days in aviation history, a tragedy that would leave a deep, unhealed scar for decades to come. The world demanded answers, but the truth, like the wreckage itself, was lost in the deep. The investigation began almost immediately. Search and rescue teams scoured the ocean, recovering floating debris and the bodies of the victims. The crucial black boxes were retrieved from the seabed after a painstaking search. Cockpit voice recorder recovered. Flight data recorder recovered. Investigators from India's DGCA and the US NTSB gathered to analyze the data. They were confident the cause would soon be found. Initial findings pointed to a catastrophic structural failure of the vertical stabilizer, the tail fin. The flight data recorder showed a sudden yaw. Then the aircraft plunged into its fatal dive. This echoed other incidents involving tail failures. The official report was released 18 months later. It concluded a weakness in the composite materials of the tail fin was the probable cause. The case was officially closed, and the blame placed on a manufacturing flaw. For the public and the airline industry, it was a plausible explanation. Yet, for the families, the official story never felt complete. For a small circle of aviation experts, doubts lingered. There were too many loose ends, too many nagging inconsistencies. Why had a nearly new aircraft, one with a flawless maintenance record, failed so catastrophically? The cockpit voice recorder was particularly perplexing. In the final moments, amidst the alarms, the pilot's words were frantic and confused. They spoke of a control anomaly and fighting against the autopilot, fragments that didn't perfectly align with a simple structural failure. As years turned into decades, the crash faded from the headlines. It became a settled case, a tragic footnote. Memorials were built, families tried to move on, but the lack of absolute certainty left a void. The official report was the final word, accepted by industry and regulators, and new inspection protocols for composite tails were implemented worldwide. Yet for some, the mystery lingered. A ghost in the machine. Did the investigators miss something? The truth behind the disaster remained submerged, waiting for someone to dive back into the depths. Captain Arjun Rao was a young pilot at Air India when Flight 171 went down. He had known Captain Sharma and First Officer Mehta personally, the kind of pilots he aspired to be. He attended the memorial services, saw the raw grief of the families, and felt a profound sense of injustice. He read the official report cover to cover, but the conclusions felt hollow. Over the next 30 years, Arjun built a stellar career. He became a senior Czech captain, responsible for training other pilots on the 747 and later the 777. But the ghost of Flight 171 never left him. He collected every document he could find: news clippings, technical papers, and a bootleg copy of the full cockpit voice recorder transcript. It became his quiet obsession. Upon his retirement in 2024, Arjun decided he finally had the time and freedom to pursue the truth. He wasn't a formal investigator, just a pilot with a deep-seated need for answers. His motivation wasn't about blame. It was about honoring his fallen comrades and ensuring such a tragedy could never happen again. He believed the official report had simplified a complex event and may have missed a critical lesson. Arjun's investigation began with the physical evidence. While most wreckage lay at the bottom of the Arabian Sea, a significant amount had been recovered and stored in a secure hangar in Mumbai. He used his old contacts, called in favors, and wrote countless letters to the DGCA. After months of persistence, a skeptical official finally granted him limited supervised access. Walking into the hangar was a sobering experience. The mangled pieces of the Empress of the Skies were laid out like a giant grim jigsaw puzzle. The official report had focused on the vertical stabilizer, but Arjun's eyes were drawn elsewhere, to a recovered section of the horizontal stabilizer with faint but distinct stress marks. He photographed the marks from every angle, documenting their precise location and pattern. This was the first thread that, if pulled, could unravel the accepted story. He reached out to a retired aeronautical engineer, and together they began running computer simulations based on the flight data recorder information, not assuming a tail failure but testing a sudden, uncommanded full deflection of the horizontal stabilizer. The results were shocking. The simulation almost perfectly matched the flight data, the lurch, the violent pitch, and the subsequent catastrophic structural overload. The simulation was a breakthrough, but it raised an even bigger question. What could have caused the horizontal stabilizer to move so violently on its own? Arjun suspected the answer wasn't in the sky, but on the ground. He needed the complete, unabridged maintenance records for call sign VTEFO. Getting these records was hard. Air India was reluctant. Arjun made a formal RTI request and, while he waited, spoke to retired maintenance technicians from the 1990s. Most remembered nothing unusual. One older mechanic recalled peculiar glitches, intermittent, hard-to-diagnose faults with flight control computers. After nearly a year, a thick, dusty binder arrived at Arjun's home. It was the complete maintenance log for VTEFO. He spent weeks poring over every page. Most entries were routine, but then he found it, a log from 6 weeks before the crash, noting a brief, uncommanded pitch trim anomaly during climb-out. Technicians had investigated on the ground. They ran diagnostics on the flight control computer and stabilizer trim motor but found no faults. The log was signed off, could not replicate fault on ground. The phrase "monitor for recurrence" was added. To many it was a routine note. To Arjun, it was the smoking gun. Arjun returned to the most haunting piece of evidence, the cockpit voice recorder. This time he listened not just to words, but to the sounds of the cockpit. Subtle clicks, an autopilot disconnect, and a faint electronic chime. He identified a faint chime that sounded just before the autopilot disconnected. The high-speed spin of the stabilizer trim wheel, a sound it should only make during extreme manual inputs. But the pilot's hands were not on the controls. He searched for original witness statements and found a brief, dismissed report from a commercial fisherman who had been in the Arabian Sea that night. When Arjun tracked the man down in a small coastal village, the fisherman recalled a strange wobble and a brief bright flash at the aircraft's tail before it began its final steep dive. That flash could be consistent with an electrical short or a small explosion within the stabilizer actuator, the very motor that moves the horizontal stabilizer. The fisherman's testimony, once dismissed, now aligned with Arjun's theory of a primary electromechanical failure. Armed with logs, CVR analysis, and the stress marks he photographed, Arjun began assembling a reconstruction. Arjun compiled the maintenance log, CVR audio, the fisherman's account, and the stress marks on the wreckage. The pieces formed a picture starkly different from the official report. He proposed a terrifying sequence. A latent defect in the flight control computer or its circuitry sent an erroneous full deflection command to the stabilizer trim motor. The stabilizer forced an extreme nose-up maneuver. The autopilot could not counteract it and disconnected, sounding its alarm. The pilots were caught by surprise, hit by overwhelming G-forces. Aerodynamic pressures strained the tail. The vertical stabilizer failed as a consequence of this violent sequence, not as the initiating fault. Arjun submitted his detailed 200-page reconstruction to India's DGCA and the NTSB in early 2025. At first, there was resistance. Reopening a 30-year-old case was unprecedented. DGCA convened a special panel. Forensic teams re-examined wreckage. Analysts re-ran flight data with Arjun's parameters and were stunned. They confirmed the stress marks and used advanced audio filtering to isolate the runaway stabilizer trim sound on the CVR. The truth, hidden for 3 decades, was finally revealed. The official revision sent shockwaves through the global aviation industry. The revelation that a latent software or electronic fault could cause such a catastrophic failure was a chilling wake-up call. The FAA, EASA, and other authorities issued immediate airworthiness directives. They mandated more rigorous diagnostics for flight control computers on legacy aircraft and overhauled certification standards. Could not replicate sign-off became a red flag. Maintenance practices changed. Intermittent glitches warranted deeper diagnostics or module replacement, even when not reproducible. Pilot training was updated to emphasize manual flying skills and prepare crews for automation failures. The incident became core material in simulator curricula. Developers and manufacturers re-examined avionics hardware and code. Single-point software failures, once seen as remote, were now critical threats to eliminate. Arjun Rao's discovery solved a 30-year mystery and helped make the skies safer, a tribute to the 345 victims. The story of Air India 171 and its eventual resolution is more than a technical investigation. For 3 decades, the accepted narrative was set in stone. It took the unwavering dedication of one retired pilot, Captain Arjun Rao, to challenge that established history. Arjun's success highlights a critical lesson. No investigation is infallible. Cognitive biases like confirmation bias can shape outcomes. Fresh eyes matter. He started from scratch, questioned every assumption, and looked at the evidence unburdened by immediate pressure. Finding the truth requires expertise, resources, patience, courage, and an almost obsessive refusal to accept an incomplete answer. Arjun faced skepticism and institutional inertia, but he persevered because he believed the precise, unvarnished truth mattered, to families and to safety. His work changed maintenance practices, training, certification standards, and the way we think about automation and redundancy in aviation. In the end, one person can change the course of history. Captain Arjun Rao did not set out to become a hero. He was simply a pilot who needed to understand. By piecing together a 30-year-old puzzle, he brought closure to a national tragedy and triggered safety changes that will save lives. His legacy reminds us to never stop asking questions, never stop searching for answers, and never underestimate the capacity of a single determined individual to bring a long-buried truth into the light.